What happens when the face of a company, a figurehead to so many, decides to see the world through the eyes of those who work tirelessly behind the scenes? What if, for once, the CEO, the one in the sleek office, the one who makes all the decisions, decides to put himself in the shoes of those who carry the weight of the company every day? Let's dive in and see what happens when a man named Jacob Price, the CEO of Price Delivery Co., does just that. Jacob Price wasn't your average CEO. He was the kind of man who believed in the power of hard work, discipline, and honesty. He'd built Price Delivery Co. from the ground up with sweat, blood, and countless hours of painstaking effort. It was a company that prided itself on its commitment to customers, delivering goods all over the state with precision and care. He had done it all, worked in warehouses, driven the delivery trucks, and even handled customer complaints in the early days. But as the years passed, Jacob became more of a name on a glossy letterhead than a person connected to the core of his company. And somewhere along the way, he started to lose touch with the people who made his business run. One chilly morning, as Jacob sat in his polished office, the phone calls came in. Complaints from customers about delayed deliveries, reports of broken equipment, murmurs of discontent from employees. But what hit him hardest was a message from his head of operations, Mark Sullivan. "Jacob, we're hearing rumblings. Some of the guys aren't happy. They're saying there's a real divide between you and the people on the ground." For a man like Jacob, who always prided himself on his transparency and open-door policy, that hit hard. He thought he knew his employees well, knew their struggles, their concerns. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that maybe he didn't. That's when Jacob made a decision that would change everything. He would go undercover. He would put on the uniform, jump in the truck, and see for himself how the people who made his business tick were really being treated. No more emails or reports. He was going to see it all firsthand. Jacob walked into the warehouse early the next morning, his heart pounding with nervous anticipation. He'd worn a simple delivery uniform, one that he'd borrowed from a colleague. The uniform was slightly too big, but it didn't matter. He was here for the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it would be. "Morning, Mike," Jacob called out as he passed the foreman, trying to keep his voice casual. Mike, the foreman, barely glanced at him. Yeah, get your deliveries done. You're late," Mike grumbled, his voice thick with exhaustion. Jacob swallowed hard. This wasn't the warm welcome he'd expected, but that didn't stop him. He climbed into the nearest delivery truck and started the engine, the sound of the diesel filling the air. The route was a usual one. Long stretches of highway, small towns with local shops, and homes scattered across the landscape. As he drove, Jacob kept an eye on the team. The other delivery drivers, men like David and Sean, looked tired, their faces drawn with fatigue. Every stop was a race against time, and the stress was palpable. David, a driver with a few years of experience, pulled up beside him at one stop. "Boss, you feeling okay in that uniform?" David joked, but there was an edge to his voice. "I'm fine, David. Just trying to get the job done," Jacob responded, forcing a smile. But as the day wore on, Jacob saw more and more. It wasn't just the exhaustion. It was the way employees were treated by the higher-ups, the way the workers were treated as expendable. He saw how David's truck was filled with faulty equipment, how Sean's delivery had been delayed for hours due to understaffing, and how the dispatch team never seemed to have enough hands on deck. At lunchtime, Jacob sat in a small break room with the other drivers. The room was small, cramped with old vending machines and worn-out chairs. The workers didn't talk much, but their faces told a different story. "Man, I don't know how much longer I can do this," Sean muttered under his breath. "They don't care about us. We're just bodies to them." Jacob's stomach twisted. He wanted to say something, wanted to make it all better, but he knew this wasn't just about words. It was about the system he'd built, the system that had allowed this divide to happen. That afternoon, everything changed. Jacob made his final stop of the day at a small, family-owned store on the outskirts of town. He'd heard rumors that the employees there had been treated poorly, rushed deliveries, customers left unsatisfied. As he pulled up to the store, he saw something that made his heart stop. A young driver named Ben, a kid barely in his 20s, was standing outside the store arguing with the store manager, a stern-faced man named Mr. Rivers. "What do you mean you can't find the invoice?" Ben shouted, his hands shaking. "I've been here an hour trying to fix this, and you're telling me to just leave?" Mr. Rivers stood with his arms crossed, unflinching. "You're wasting my time, Ben. You should have known better. I'm not dealing with this." Jacob could see the frustration in Ben's eyes. He wasn't just upset. He was defeated. Ben had been under pressure all day, trying to get deliveries done on time with no support from the company. Without thinking, Jacob stepped out of the truck and walked toward them. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice steady but firm. Both men turned to face him, startled. Ben's eyes widened as he realized who the stranger was. You're the new guy?" Ben stammered, his face unsure. Jacob nodded. "Just here to help. I'm Jacob. What's going on?" Mr. Rivers scoffed. "Just another delivery driver who doesn't know how to do his job." Jacob could feel the tension in the air. It wasn't just about the delivery anymore. It was about the years of pent-up frustration, the long hours, the broken promises. Without missing a beat, Jacob looked directly at Mr. Rivers. "You know, if you treated your employees with a little more respect, you'd get a lot more out of them. But you're not doing anyone any favors acting like this," he said, his voice calm but carrying a weight. Mr. Rivers' face turned red. "Who do you think you are, talking to me like that?" "I'm someone who knows what it feels like to be on the ground," Jacob replied quietly. "And I'm not here to let that slide anymore." It was after this encounter that Jacob's world began to unravel. He realized just how deep the problems went. But he also understood something even more important. He couldn't fix this alone. He couldn't simply be a CEO who showed up for photo ops. He had to be the kind of leader who truly understood his team, who worked with them, not just above them. That night, as Jacob sat in his truck driving back to the warehouse, he made a vow to himself. He would change things. He would rebuild the connection between his company and its employees. The first step was to call a meeting with the higher-ups, people who had forgotten the core values of the company. He told them, straight out, that this was their final chance to do better. If they didn't, they would be out. In the months that followed, Jacob worked tirelessly to repair the damage. He implemented training programs for managers, encouraged open communication between departments, and most importantly, he made sure his drivers and delivery teams knew they were valued. David, Sean, and Ben became his right-hand team. Together, they rebuilt the trust that had been lost. They worked side by side, not as CEO and employees, but as a family. 1 year later, Jacob walked into that same small break room, the one where he had seen the frustration in his employees' eyes. This time, the room was full of laughter, filled with voices that had been silenced for too long. A driver, David, looked up and smiled. "You did good, boss." Jacob smiled back, his heart full. "No, we did good." And as the company grew, it wasn't just the deliveries that improved. It was the people, the heart of the company that had been restored. The true measure of a man is not how he leads when things are going well, but how he treats those who are unseen in the shadows. In the end, Jacob Price wasn't just the CEO. He was a man who learned the hardest lesson of all, that leadership isn't about control, it's about care. That's the story, friends. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a pleasure sharing it with you all. Don't forget to comment below and let me know where you're watching from. It's always fun to see the global reach of these stories. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button for more amazing stories, tips, and tricks. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. If you'd like to show some extra love, tap the 3 dots near the share button and send a super thanks.